Dusk settled over the edge of Kitali village and made distance hard to judge. The dump lay beyond the last mud walls in a shallow depression where people threw broken plastic, spoiled grain sacks, and bones from market days. Children were warned away after dark because hyenas sometimes followed the smell. That evening, a boy named Musa was walking back from the river with an empty jerry can when he saw something moving in the thorn scrub behind the dump. At first he thought it was a cow that had slipped its rope. Then the shape stepped into the open and the size made no sense. It was an elephant calf, young enough that its ears still looked too large for its head. It did not charge. It took 3 slow steps and its front knees folded. The calf tried to push itself up with its trunk, but the trunk sagged and dragged in the dust. Musa backed away, then ran toward the nearest compound, shouting for adults. A small group gathered at the edge of the dump. No one approached. They kept a safe line between the calf and the houses. Old men muttered that a calf alone meant trouble. Someone said it must have fallen into a pit and crawled out. Someone else said poachers sometimes chased calves until they separated. No one knew, but everyone understood the risk. If the herd was nearby, it could come through the village at night. Women pulled children behind them. No one wanted to touch it. If it died there, hyenas would find it before dawn and the village would wake to fighting in the dark. If it lived, it might lead the herd straight to their gardens. The calf lay on its side, ribs visible when it breathed. One eye was half closed. When it tried to lift its head, the effort made its body shake. Foam clung to the corner of its mouth. The villagers could see dried mud on one shoulder as if it had been down for a long time. It made a low sound each time it exhaled. Near the dump's edge lived a small brown dog the village called Suma. She had given birth a week earlier. Her puppies were hidden under a sheet of rusted metal beside a stack of scrap wood. Suma survived on scraps and theft. She snapped at hands that came too close to her litter. As people watched the calf, Suma emerged with her belly still loose from nursing. She moved in a straight line, head low, tail rigid. A man raised a stone, not to hurt her but to stop her if she lunged in the confusion. Another man lowered his hand and told him to wait. Suma did not look at the people, she looked at the calf. The calf's trunk lifted a few centimeters, wavering. It turned its head toward Suma as if it recognized breathing and warmth. It tried to roll onto its chest. Its legs splayed and it failed. It reached again with the trunk, searching. The movement brought the trunk within a meter of Suma's paws. Suma froze. Her lips pulled back and her teeth showed. The villagers tensed. They expected a bite, then a frightened calf smashing through their line. Musa grabbed his cousin's shirt and pulled him farther away. Instead, Suma stepped closer, sniffed the trunk tip and pulled back. She circled once, keeping her body between the calf's face and the people. Then she sat as if deciding and lowered herself onto her side in the dust. The gesture was deliberate. The calf responded like an animal that needed any rule to follow. It pushed its trunk against her belly and held it there. Suma flinched but did not snap. She watched the calf's eye, then looked toward the scrub. A murmur passed through the villagers. No one stepped forward. The calf's breathing slowed a little, not because it was safe but because it had stopped fighting the ground. Suma's ears twitched at every sound. She gave a short bark that warned the closest men to stay back. The village chairman, a broad man named Juma, arrived and tried to take control. He told everyone to keep distance and not to shout. He asked who had seen the calf first. Musa raised his hand. Juma asked if anyone had heard elephants at the river recently. 2 women said they had heard branches breaking upriver 2 nights before. Juma decided they needed a ranger. He sent a teenager on a bicycle toward the wildlife post 8 kilometers away with a message. As the light faded, flies gathered at the calf's mouth and eye. A young man brought a bucket of water and stopped 10 steps short, unsure what to do. Suma stood, walked to the bucket, sniffed it, then returned to the calf and lay down again. Juma told the young man to set the bucket down and step back. He did. The calf did not rise to drink, but it turned its head toward the water. Night insects began their steady noise. In the thorn scrub something moved, then stopped. Suma's head snapped up. She gave a low growl. The villagers tightened their circle without closing it. Headlights appeared on the dirt track. A battered green pickup rolled to a stop. A ranger stepped out, tall and thin, wearing a faded uniform and carrying a flashlight and a rifle that stayed pointed down. His name was Daniel Mbeki. He did not speak at first. He studied the calf's position, then the dog pressed against it. He asked quietly how long it had been there. When Juma told him less than an hour, Daniel looked past the dump toward the dark scrub and listened for a sound that was not there yet. He told Juma to keep everyone back and stop anyone from feeding it by hand. He switched on his radio and asked for help from the post before full dark arrived. Daniel Mbeki kept his flashlight off as long as he could. He walked a slow half-circle around the calf, stopping outside the reach of its legs. The calf's ears hung without strength, and its breath came in shallow pulls. Daniel saw scuffed knees and a raw patch on one hip from dragging. He judged it to be only a few months old and dangerously dehydrated. Juma asked if they could move it into the village. Daniel said no. He said a herd might already be searching, and dragging the calf would leave a clear trail through homes. He said sedating a calf that weak could stop its breathing. He told Juma they would keep it where it had fallen, keep people back, and try to get it drinking. He asked for clean water and a rope to mark a boundary. He asked for no shouting and no fires. Suma stayed pressed against the calf's chest as Daniel worked. When Daniel stepped closer, she stood and placed herself between his boots and the calf's face. Daniel did not threaten her. He backed off a step and spoke softly, then moved around the calf's rear instead. Suma watched his hands and shifted to keep her body in the way. The calf lifted its trunk once and touched Suma's side, then dropped it again. Daniel called the post and requested a rescue team at first light. The radio crackled and the answer was uncertain. A vehicle was down, fuel was short, and staff were tied up elsewhere. Daniel put the radio away and told Juma the village would have to manage for now. He asked for a quiet watch with 3 people at a time and a plan to drive off hyenas with noise if they came close. Before midnight, the calf managed its first drink. A young man rolled a bucket closer with a stick, and Daniel guided the trunk tip into the water without forcing it. The calf sucked in a mouthful and coughed, then tried again. Each swallow was slow, but it kept going until the bucket was half empty. At dawn, Daniel set rules. No children at the dump. No one behind the calf. No one between the scrub and the calf. Food could be left at a distance, but no one would hand feed. If elephants appeared, everyone would run to the hard ground near the school, not into the narrow garden paths. Juma enforced the rules with argument and shame, and Daniel backed him with his uniform and his refusal to bend. Suma began to shape the days as much as Daniel did. She slept with her body against the calf's legs and rose when it stirred. When the calf tried to stand and failed, Suma barked until it stopped struggling and rested. When people crept closer to stare, she rushed them back. Her puppies, blind at first, crawled from under the scrap sheet and found her belly wherever she lay. They nursed even when the calf leaned in, and the calf learned to hold still when their tiny paws scratched at its skin. By the 4th day, the calf could lift its head and sit on its chest for longer stretches. Daniel watched for signs of collapse and kept water available in a shallow pan. The calf drank small amounts and kept them down. A week passed and the calf stood for minutes at a time. It wobbled on stiff legs and used its trunk to brace against the ground. Daniel decided it had the strength to walk short distances. He drove a thorn stake into the soil and tied the rope as a loose guide, not a leash. When the sun rose high, he led the calf a few steps to shade and then back again. Suma followed close, touching the calf's flank with her nose as if steering it. The village split into 2 groups. Some saw the calf as a test of decency and a chance to avoid trouble if officials later asked questions. They left water at dawn and fruit scraps from market stalls. Others saw only danger. They counted the days until a herd arrived and crushed granaries or injured someone. They demanded Daniel remove the calf, and Daniel told them the team still had not come. At night, danger came from smaller mouths. Hyenas tested the edge of the dump, drawn by smell and the sound of an animal that still could not run. Men banged metal sheets and struck sticks on stones. Daniel fired no shots. Suma joined the noise with sharp barks and stood over her puppies when eyes glinted in the dark. By the end of the second week, the calf began to follow Suma. When she trotted to the water point, the calf trailed her, stopping when she stopped, starting when she started. The puppies, now open-eyed, stumbled around the calf's feet and climbed onto its forelegs. The calf lifted one puppy gently with its trunk and set it down again when it squealed. Suma watched, tense but not attacking. Word spread and visitors came. Daniel turned them away when he could, and Juma posted young men on the path, but the crowd never fully stopped. In the fourth week, the calf's strength changed the problem. It no longer lay flat for hours. It walked, explored, and tested the rope line. It could now push through weak barriers, and Daniel knew it would soon wander beyond control. That same week, Daniel found fresh elephant dung near the river path, with prints beside it deep enough to hold water in their centers. He followed the line for a short distance and stopped when the scrub thickened. Daniel smelled leaves on the wind and knew they were not the only ones watching. When he returned, Suma was digging at the thorn edge and whining, and the calf stood with its ears lifted, facing the dark trees as if it was listening to something the village could not hear. Daniel woke before dawn and walked the river path again. He moved slowly, looking for broken stems and fresh dung. The ground still held the night's damp, and the prints he found were sharper than the day before. 2 adults had passed within the last 12 hours, and one set of smaller tracks ran between them. Daniel stopped at a snapped acacia branch and rubbed the torn bark with his thumb. The sap was wet. He turned back without going farther because he did not want to meet them in thick scrub where he could not see the angle of a charge. When he reached the dump, the calf was standing. Its ears were lifted and slightly spread, and its trunk hung forward as if it was tasting the air. Suma paced a narrow line between the calf and the trees. She kept glancing into the brush and then back at her puppies. Daniel watched the dog's body language and did not need more proof. The herd was close enough for the calf to sense it. Juma met Daniel at the rope line and asked what he had seen. Daniel said the herd was likely nearby and could arrive at any time. Juma's face tightened. He said people were already talking, and the talk was not calm. By mid-morning, the crowd was larger than usual. Some came with fear, some with pride, and some with a belief that a good deed would be rewarded. A woman named Rehema insisted the herd would understand the dog meant no harm. A younger man argued that elephants would see a dog and puppies around a calf as a threat, not a gift. Rehema called him cruel. He told her she was inventing stories to feel safe. Daniel tried to push the argument toward practical steps. He told Juma to keep the crowd back and to stop the constant movement near the calf. He said elephants notice patterns, and repeated human presence could make them charge sooner. Juma agreed, but enforcement was weak. People drifted in, pointed, and took turns coming close when Suma allowed it. The calf tested its new strength all day. It pushed at the rope line and stepped over it once. Daniel moved in quickly and guided it back with his voice and a long stick held low, not striking, only blocking. Suma circled Daniel and barked at the stick, then returned to the calf and pressed her shoulder into its front legs, as if to anchor it in place. The puppies chased each other under the calf's belly until Suma snapped at them and herded them to the scrap shelter. That afternoon, Daniel called a meeting with Juma and 2 elders. He explained what he expected if the herd arrived. The first goal was human safety. The second was to avoid pushing elephants into the village. The third was to separate the dog and puppies from the calf before the elephants reached the open ground. Juma asked how they would do that without causing the calf to panic. Daniel said they might not manage it, but they had to try. He asked for a livestock pen with a gate that could shut fast, 2 clean blankets, and a basket for the puppies. He asked for 1 vehicle with fuel and a driver who would follow instructions. The elders offered their own ideas. One suggested firing shots to scare the herd away. Daniel said that could split the herd and send them running through homes. Another suggested tying Suma near the dump so she could not interfere. Daniel said tying her there could make her fight harder and confuse the elephants. Rehema spoke again and said the dog should stay during the reunion because the calf trusted her. Daniel told her trust was not the same as safety, and a matriarch might treat any canine near a calf as a predator. Rehema shook her head and said Daniel was thinking like a man with papers, not like an animal with a heart. That night the village tried to keep quiet, but anxiety made noise. Two boys slipped past the rope to look closely, and Suma chased them back. Juma drove them away and warned parents. Daniel stayed near the calf and listened into the dark. Just after midnight, Daniel felt a vibration through the ground. It carried like distant thunder. The calf lifted its head and made a thin call that did not sound like a full trumpet. Suma froze, then pressed her body against the calf's front legs. The puppies huddled under the metal sheet. At first light, Daniel found new damage along the river path. A line of crushed grass led toward the village, and the scent of elephants was stronger. He sent Musa on the bicycle to the post again, demanding a team. Musa returned hours later with bad news. The post had received the message but could not spare a vehicle until the next day. Daniel's jaw tightened. He told Juma they would manage with what they had. The calf grew restless as the day warmed. It kept turning toward the trees and pausing, ears wide, trunk raised. Suma began digging at the edge of the scrub, scraping dirt as if she could open a hole large enough to hide the calf. Daniel whistled for her to stop. She ignored him. By late afternoon, the wind shifted. Birds stopped calling near the thorn line. Even the goats in the nearest pen quieted and stood facing the same direction. Daniel walked to the brush with his rifle still down and his flashlight ready. He did not step into the shade. He listened and waited. A shape moved, then another. The first elephant emerged at the edge of the trees, only partly visible. It was large and scarred, with torn ear edges and a deliberate, measured step. The calf answered with a higher call and took 2 steps forward before Daniel blocked it. Suma rushed to the calf and barked once, sharp and urgent, then looked back at the trees. More bodies shifted behind the first. Daniel counted at least 5 adults, spread out, heads high, testing the air. Then the matriarch stepped into clear view. She was broader than the others and carried herself with a steady certainty. She stopped and held still, eyes on the calf. For a moment the village believed the hard part was over. Then the matriarch's gaze dropped to the ground at the calf's feet, fixed on the small dog, and the puppies clustered beside her, and her ears began to flare. The matriarch did not trumpet. She stepped out of the trees with her head high and her ears spread wide. The adults behind her shifted into a loose arc at the brush line. Daniel stayed between the calf and the herd, but far enough back that the elephants would not feel boxed in. He signaled Juma to pull the crowd away. Some villagers backed up. Others lingered, believing the reunion meant safety. Rehema stepped forward with her palms raised. Juma yanked her back before she got closer. The calf stood trembling, ears lifted, trunk hovering as if it could not decide where to point it. Suma stayed tight to the calf's front legs. Her puppies pressed against her belly and whined. The calf lowered its head and touched Suma's back with its trunk, the same gentle contact it had learned over the month. The matriarch's eyes locked on that movement. She did not read comfort. She read a canine presence at a vulnerable calf's feet. Daniel tried to separate them without force. He stepped sideways to open space and tapped the ground with his stick, pointing toward the scrap shelter. Suma did not retreat. She shifted with the calf and bared her teeth at anyone who edged close. Daniel asked for the blankets and the basket. 2 men approached, cautious and slow. Suma growled. The puppies scattered, then rushed back to her. The matriarch flapped her ears once, sharp and loud. Dust rose at the feet of the adults behind her. The calf called thin and high and tried to step toward the herd. Daniel angled his shoulders to block it, guiding it back without touching. He needed the calf still until the dog and puppies were away. The matriarch lowered her head and rocked her weight forward. Daniel recognized the decision in her posture. He shouted for the men to stop. They froze. Suma braced, standing over the puppies. The matriarch charged. Her feet hit the ground in heavy beats. She came straight for the dog. Daniel did not fire. A shot that close could turn the whole herd into a stampede and drive them through the village. He sprinted to the pickup and waved at Kato to start it. The engine caught with a cough. Juma shouted for everyone to get back. People ran, pulling children by the wrists. Rehema tried to rush forward and Juma pinned her behind him. Daniel ran alongside the pickup as it rolled, keeping himself in front of its fender so Kato would not accelerate too hard. Suma barked once at the oncoming elephant, then turned to gather her puppies. She grabbed one by the scruff and dragged it toward the shelter, then spun back for the others. The calf lurched after her, panicked, and stepped into the path between Suma and the matriarch. The matriarch did not slow. Daniel made the choice he had been postponing for a month. He ran out on an angle, not toward the village, but away from it, trying to pull the charge sideways. He snapped on his flashlight and swept the beam across the matriarch's face. At the same time, Kato blasted the horn and revved the engine. The sound and light did not stop her, but they bent her line. She veered toward the pickup by a few steps, away from the shelter. Daniel kept moving, shouting and clapping, making himself the nearer problem while keeping distance. Kato drove forward and right, horn steady, dust boiling under the tires. The matriarch swung her head toward the vehicle and struck the air where the dog had been. Suma used the opening. One puppy froze in open ground, too small to understand the noise. Musa darted in, scooped it up, and shoved it under the sheet of metal with the others. Suma followed, body blocking the gap, growling into the dark. The calf screamed and tried to follow the shelter. Daniel cut in front of it and held his stick wide like a gate, guiding it back. The calf hit the rope line and stopped, shaking. Behind it, the herd stepped out farther, closing the distance in controlled steps. The matriarch turned fully on the pickup. She hit the hood with her trunk hard enough to dent the metal. Kato swore and held the engine steady. Daniel waved him backward. The driver reversed slowly, giving space. The matriarch stamped, then paused, and her gaze returned to the calf. In that pause, the purpose of the herd became clear. Two adults moved to the calf's sides and touched its neck and ribs with their trunks, quick checks, then firmer contact. The calf leaned into them. It tried to twist its head back toward the shelter. One adult blocked the movement with its shoulder, not violent, only final. Daniel lowered the flashlight and backed away. He kept his rifle down and his voice quiet. Juma pushed the last watchers farther toward the school ground until only Daniel, Kato, and two elders remained near the rope, standing still. Suma did not come out. Her eyes shone from under the metal sheet. The puppies made thin sounds and then went quiet. The calf stretched its trunk toward the shelter and held it there, trembling, as if memorizing the exact place. Daniel signaled Kato to cut the horn but keep the engine running. The matriarch stepped to the calf and touched its forehead with her trunk, holding contact long enough that the calf's body sagged. Then the matriarch turned. The adults shifted as one and formed a moving wall around the calf. They guided it toward the trees, trunks touching, shoulders closing gaps. The calf resisted once, planting its feet and calling back toward the dump. An adult pushed from behind, steady and insistent, and the calf yielded and walked. At the brush line, the matriarch stopped and looked back. Daniel did not move. Juma did not move. The dog did not move. The matriarch flapped her ears in a warning without stepping forward, then vanished into the scrub with the others. The calf's calls faded, then stopped. When the last sound was gone, Daniel exhaled and felt his hands shaking. He crouched at the shelter. Suma crawled out first, body low, eyes wide, tail down. The puppies followed, trembling but alive. Musa stepped back as Suma sniffed the air around him, then returned to her litter. Daniel looked at the dented hood and the churned ground, then at the empty dump where the calf had stood. He knew the herd could circle back in the night, drawn by scent and by memory of threat. He told Juma to keep the village quiet and the road clear, and he asked Kato to stay in the truck until dawn, because if the elephants returned, the dog and puppies would be the first thing the matriarch would look for. Before he left, Daniel walked the rope line and picked up the dropped blanket. He listened for any branch crack and heard only insects. Still, he ordered Juma to post 2 watchers at the school and keep all dogs tied for the night except Suma. He wanted one warning bark if elephants returned at once.